Ukraine was in absolute security before 1991 and 2014, when Ukraine was independent democratic country. But then your security officers come to the Ukraine. Your British and American officers come to Ukraine, overthrow democratic elected president, kill Ukrainian democracy.
Now, President Putin would like a deal and is not going to mess around, according to President Trump, speaking to reporters last night. He also hinted at offering economic incentives to Russia for ending the war in Ukraine. So the two presidents are going to meet in Alaska this evening. We can speak now to Sergei Markov, a former advisor to Vladimir Putin. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is it that President Putin wants to get out of this meeting?
First of all, Vladimir Putin wants to discuss condition of moving to the peace to Ukraine. Russian position is very simple, very clear. Russia very much supports stopping of the war, moving to the peace by resolution of the main reason of those conflicts. It means that political repression against Russian language, which is native language of the 80% of Ukrainian population, should be stopped. Political repression against Orthodox Church should be stopped. Political repression against media and political parties who see Russia as a friendly country should be stopped. If these problems will be solved, the peace will be. Russia fighting not for territories, but for the changing of the repressive Russophobic character of Ukrainian neo-colonial regime.
That's really interesting. So are you saying that actually you say that Russia is not fighting for territory? So if those things were agreed to, so things like protecting the Russian language and the things that you've outlined there, are you saying that Vladimir Putin would be willing to give back all of the territory in Ukraine that he has taken in return for that?
Theoretically, in future, yes, but of course not now.
Why not now?
Because now we have Ukraine repressive neo-Nazi regime which use terror. Vladimir Putin cannot give millions of Russian people who was from former Ukrainian regions to the hands of the neo-Nazi terroristic group, which now has a power using Vladimir Zelensky, this unique Jew who is neo-Nazi. So, of course, not now. First, regime should be fully changed. And we're talking about security guarantee of Ukraine, by the way. A security guarantee of Ukraine very simple. Just come back Ukrainian political system to the situation before 2014. You may remember from 1991 of getting independence until 2014 when neo-Nazi putsch happened, Ukraine was in absolute security nearby the Russia. So,
okay. So you're saying it's a neo-Nazi. You're saying it's a neo-Nazi regime under President Zelensky. Of course, there were elections there, a democratic nation. People voted for President Zelensky. Let's get back to the meeting in Alaska, because I think lots of people have lots of questions about this. Do you think that President Putin is willing to compromise to end the war? There were suggestions that he wants the Donbass region. What would he give Ukraine in return for that? The idea of exchange of territory, it's not Putin's idea. It's Donald Trump's idea, because Donald Trump wants to ceasefire to be stable. And Donald Trump understands that if Ukraine continue to occupy Donbass region and Russia continue to occupy part of the Kharkiv region, Sumy region, Nikolaev region, and Dnipropetrovsk region, the peace and ceasefire will be unstable. To make peace and ceasefire more stable, the change of territory needed. So it's Donald Trump idea. It's not Putin idea. And about peace deal, Russia agrees, as already told, we're solving on the problem. But about ceasefire, just for our position is very, very clear. We're against unconditional ceasefire, because this unconditional ceasefire will be used just for preparation for the new war. Because, as we know, British Prime Minister promised to send British troops to Ukrainian territory, and also
to send anti-rocket missiles nearby. It means
okay, that's
that
really interesting. Just for our audience.
The war between Russia and Great Britain will happen.
Sergei Markov, just for our audience. Forgive me, I just want to try and make clear what you're saying, which I think is really interesting and important to our audience. You're saying that Russia doesn't want an unconditional ceasefire because you think that then Europe and Ukraine would gather power together to attack Russia because of the security guarantees offered by Europe. I mean, what Ukraine is worried about is that actually if there is a ceasefire, Russia may try and regroup and try and then launch another invasion into Ukraine. Is that possible?
It's possible. But, you may know that Russian army is going forward. Russian army is offensive. And Ukrainian army is losing its territory. And all unconditional ceasefire only to the interest of the losing army. It's normal. That's why it's not so good for the Russian. But also, we have already experience of Minsk 1 and Minsk 2 agreement. They already used by Western coalition just for preparation for the new war. So, ceasefire, if ceasefire step to the peace, yes. If ceasefire step to the new, more bloody war, no.
Okay. And do you think that President Putin is at a stage now where he wants to end this war? Or is he using this summit as a delaying tactic to prevent further sanctions and secondary sanctions from the US?
Russia don't prevent sanctions. I should remember you that after 30,000 different sanctions, which has never happened in the world history, Russian economic growth last year 3.5%. Economic growth in United States 2%, economic growth in Europe 1%.
So you're saying Russia's economy is really strong, it's doing really well at the moment?
Not in the best condition. We prefer Russian economy to have economic growth like in China and India, but not as Europe. Of course, sanction is bad things, but they play not too big role. More important, stop killing of the people. Because from our point of view, and I know that it's from point of view of Zelensky, of Putin for sure, that this is civil war for us. Because for us, Ukrainians, they are Russians. The Ukrainians and Russians, it's like Scottish and British.
Well, I think Scottish people would say that they're,
the British.
I'm sat next to a Scottishman. He might have a few issues on that. But I think many Ukrainians don't see themselves as Russian, and maybe that's the problem. One final question to ask you before we move on. Obviously, this is happening. This meeting is happening in Alaska today. We know, of course, that Alaska used to be Russian territory. Does Vladimir Putin consider Alaska should be Russian territory once again?
100% not. Vladimir Putin fully agree with territorial integrity of the democratic government, which represent the people. The problem is...
Hang on a minute. You can't talk about Vladimir Putin recognising territorial integrity and democratically elected leaders when he's invaded Ukraine, because they had territorial integrity and they had a democratically elected regime, a government.
No. The problem is that Ukraine have no democracy. When Ukraine was democracy before neo-Nazi putsch organized by
elections. They voted in elections.
Pacify election and terror. Election in Ukraine is like election in Italy in Mussolini time. So no, Ukraine. If you ask about security of Ukraine was in absolute security before 1991 and 2014, when Ukraine was independent democratic country. But then your security officers come to the Ukraine. Your British and American officers come to Ukraine, overthrow democratic elected president, kill Ukrainian democracy, impose terroristic regime, and use this terroristic regime to make a counter-Russia from Ukraine.
Okay.
And we should accept it. Let's imagine that somebody come to the Scotland, making overthrowing of the democratic president, then prohibited English language in Scottish.
Okay, I'm going to jump in now, just simply because you're shouting now, and it's difficult to hear. But thank you for joining us. That is Sergei Markov, a former advisor to Vladimir Putin. I mean, where do we start?
There you go. I think is what you say.
That is the Russian position. Interestingly, he said that Putin does not believe that Alaska should be part of Russia. So that in itself is quite interesting. He said the Russian economy is not in the best condition, but it's doing better than Europe. So Putin's not worried about sanctions. It's not a delaying tactic. He talked about the fact that, it's the same old thing. A neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine, not democratically elected. I mean, it was democratically elected.
Yeah.
By its very nature.
Absolutely.
That is what happened. Interestingly, though, Sergei Markov did say there that Putin is not fighting for territory.
Yes, I find that difficult to comprehend because he plainly has been. Maybe it's under this cloak that Markov was conveying there of trying to liberate Ukraine. That's the kind of Russian propaganda part of it, isn't it? And he said things like, he's not fighting for territories but for the end of the Ukrainian regime. But to my mind, those two things probably do mean a similar thing, because in theory then, who would be in charge? If the quote, Ukrainian regime was ended by this war, then who's then in charge? Presumably it's Putin taking over Ukraine. I don't know what to say about the Scotland comparison. I'm not sure it's all that helpful, is probably where my mind went. I couldn't quite follow the thread. I think lots of Scottish people would say they are Scottish and British, and they are Scottish and belong to the United Kingdom, or a part of the United Kingdom, I mean. I couldn't quite work out the comparison. I don't want to dive too deeply into it.
It is true, certainly, that some Ukrainians obviously speak Russian.
Sure.
Some Ukrainians identify as being Russian, but there's many people who don't.
Yes. And they
have a broad brush approach that all of Ukraine wants to be Russian is not true. Is
Putin attempting a sort of United Kingdom-style arrangement with Ukraine and constituent parts? I would argue that war isn't on the near horizon between Scotland and the rest of the UK. It feels like the comparison falls down in various ways. But anyway, there you are.